as you probably know from like my LinkedIn stuff, I've always kind of been doing data related stuff. I think I sort of danced around AI and took some intro stuff in grad school, and got familiar with some of the standard methods and sort of the core predictive analytics, and you learn basically the key terminology and what the different tools were. And I always recognized the big problem was sort of the data engineering side, and less the machine learning side, which is sort of, it didn't seem that hard to me. Like, I mean, there's obviously like certain algorithms and methods and stuff, but like the application was always sort of a data challenge. And so I kind of pushed into that a little bit. I did some large scale machine learning for ed tech. We implemented linear regression over Hadoop and kind of crazy things that no one should ever have to do. And then I kept doing that sort of thing. Like, I was kind of adjacent. Did a MarTech startup for a while, and then in 3 years ago, I joined Carta, and I was a backend platform team, like sort of document data type stuff. And I guess it was after the GPT API came out, the 3.5 or something like that, 3.0. We were trying to do some document extraction and using kind of typical like named entity recognition type methods. And in a weekend, we tried plugging in document data into GPT and saying, "Hey, like, can you give me these fields out of it?" And it was like better than the best thing that we had already, and with just like basically no prompt, like just zero shot, just like ask a question. And then like back before things actually got good.
Right, 3.5.
Yeah, so we were pretty excited, and that was a big area of kind of research and discovery for us, was kind of the document data extraction side of things. And then I did a bunch of different things with Carta. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on besides AI. I ran our API platform for a little bit, and then most recently, one of the things that we were working on was trying to get all the data about a venture fund in one place, so that we could deliver it to them. So we developed sort of internal ETL process to be able to do partner data sharing. And then we were kind of like, okay, we just need to have our clients write SQL. And like, okay, that seems like kind of a lot of work. What if we gave them a prompt? And like, what would that look like? So we started noodling around with that. And of course, the text-to-SQL is making pretty big jumps from like maybe 75% accuracy to 99% accuracy, 99.5% accuracy. Is very quickly approaching an asymptote of perfect. And so we were able to ride that wave a little bit and developed a pretty cool data query tool that kind of used a variety of different methods and sort of steps, agent, whatever, to do data querying. And that product is, probably soon to be released, which is pretty cool.
I've talked to a bunch of people have all said that data querying is actually fairly hard to get right. What were some of the unlocks that got you that 99.5% accuracy? You talk like it was super easy to do, and I'm sure it was super easy for you to do.
Yeah, so I think it's hard for the general case. So if you are a BI tool and you want to allow anyone to query any data with text, that's a pretty hard problem. If you have a constrained data set and you are able to bring knowledge about the data set into your context and craft your prompts about that, I think you can really get a leg up. So I would say that's part of it. I would say the other half is actually just getting really good. Like just by benchmarks, like there are text-to-SQL benchmarks, and the benchmarks are like, they need to make new ones now. So I think where things are falling apart is, when you jump from benchmark to like real world data and you haven't actually designed your data set well, or your data set's been sort of layers and layers of iteration and mutation over a period of years, and and then you're like, well, let me just throw AI at it. Like, just like a new engineer trying to learn your horrible schema is, and your unique data challenges, like, is not necessarily going to be a right perfect SQL. You're and AI wouldn't either. But for a clean data set with like a thoughtful schema with like names that make sense, things are getting very, very good. And then if when you have that control, and then you can actually add context to the prompt as well,
Yep.
all of a sudden, it's a lot better. Also, too, right? If you can, so like a tactic we used was our like data discovery agent had a tool we called our schema lookup tool, and essentially all that did was go out to the database and say, give me the schema for the tables I'm going to be querying, and that we only had like 10 different tables, and they weren't like 300 columns as well, 50. So
Yeah.
it's a tractable amount you can put in the context window, and when you actually get all of your schema in the context window with every table, every field, every description, okay, then that like helps versus if you just have like a data warehouse with hundreds of tables, and each of those tables has hundreds of fields, and then all of a sudden the pruning that down becomes a challenge, which you would need to sort of take iteratively. But in our case, like, we had sort of designed the problem and such that it was a lot easier to work with.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. The cases I'm thinking of, it was just like, well, I guess in one, like, it was also 6 months ago, which makes a pretty big difference, but it was much more open-ended in general. It was just like, it was like general queries on a BI tool. Um, so,
Yeah.
and I've heard like the cleanliness of data just is everything. And then, uh, using grounding models or providing like the actual schema, like the more you can focus down on the exact use case and make those available as tools, whether it's like officially a tool structure or just like kind of it's instantiated somewhere
Yep.
more concretely.
Yeah, exactly. So if you a really large set of tables, like being able to maybe like categorize a question and like maybe pull tables that sort of had a you'll look up schemas tables, that could be one strategy. Ours, we kind of got lucky, but we might need to move to that soon. The Snowflake's doing some really cool stuff with semantic views. Yeah, like basically the whole idea of providing a semantic layer over your data, sort of solving it with one level of indirection, where rather than necessarily trying to craft a prompt, you can just be really explicit about the data that you have. You could even maybe, if you do have dirty data, describe like, hey, don't use this column, use this other column, or whatever in these different cases. And we sort of solve that with just like descriptions.
Yeah.
You could, but still, somebody's trying to solve it in a more systemic way, and so that you could then actually have that then you can start to build a generalized tool where everyone's just using something off the shelf, and then all of a sudden they're able to get the data thing. Interesting space to watch. I know, like, Hex. I have some friends at Hex are doing some cool stuff. Snowflake's doing cool stuff. There's a handful of like cursor for database type tools
Okay.
out there. I honestly, I think everyone's just still kind of figuring things out a little bit.
Yeah.
So when we kind of got to like a really good response, we're like, actually, like, we feel like we're doing all right. Like,
For sure.
in terms of tooling, I don't think there's anyone with like a quantum leap ahead of that yet. But it is interesting. It's a lot of active research happening there.
Yeah, it feels like there's just this massive vacuum that's created, and we're all just trying to figure out like what fits in what spots and what's working and go from there.
Yeah.
What what are you interested in? Like, which spaces are you especially interested in going forwards? Are you building stuff on the side? Or
So I guess the other update is I recently left Carta. I am going to be starting at a company called Norma in next week, which is pretty exciting. And excited to just learn and see where I can be helpful there. Norm is AI for compliance. So
okay, yeah,
the sort of the general product is that they can encode SEC regulations and financial regulations and various things that internal compliance teams need to worry about coming into contact with, and or making sure that their disclosures are compliant with. And that and then as a user of the product, you can upload, maybe let's pretend you're a bank. You could upload a deck that you're going to release to investors, or you could upload a disclosure for a financial product or something like that. Anything that might be going out more publicly that would be subject to financial regulations, and then using sort of very finely crafted agents and prompt chains, they can determine whether that is compliant or not compliant and suggest modifications to your language or certain things based on the expertise. So it's a sort of a combination of both like an agent platform with a lot of legal expertise in prompt engineering, uh, and then sort of sophistication in terms of the types of clients they sell into. And so yeah, that's going to be a space I'm going to be exploring, which will be sort of both the data extraction, the inference at scale, and then certainly just the vertical of being in the legal field will be a lot of fun.
that's super cool. Congrats. So very text heavy.
Yes, yes, definitely text heavy. I mean, the stuff in the image and video generation is incredible. I'm sort of watching that with curiosity. I haven't really explored it much myself, but
Yeah,
there's a lot of amazing stuff happening there too.
I
But,
haven't.
yeah, I'm definitely more on the tech side and the language model side of things.
Yeah, I haven't explored the video or audio either. But it is interesting how like audio definitely relies heavily on LLMs. Like it relies on the text. Everything's
Certainly.
on text to speech and speech back to text. Even the video, like the image generation, it very much relies on the semantic embeddings. And so the image model is maybe
Yeah.
different, but in order for it to understand what we're asking for, it still has to integrate with the language model there.
Yeah, I was you following some stuff on the new Google the Nano Banana or whatever it's called.
Yep.
The way it sort of has that like the world knowledge from
Yeah.
Google Maps and just all of Google search and everything they've ever indexed, and this sort of, yes, is generating video, but like it's like understanding the semantics of a question and the entities, and so there's a lot of stuff under the hood to pull in, and a lot of work that's represented decades of Google just putting in the grunt work on data collection and to be able to make this effective, right? Like I saw a Google car in the street the other day, and it's just amazing. You think about how many years they've just been driving around the world, taking pictures of things, which is to arguably make something that's interesting. Obviously, like GeoGuessr is very cool, but like we haven't. But now they're actually able to like
Yeah.
turn that into model and high leverage knowledge, which is kind of interesting to see.
Amazing that they like them and many others had the foresight to just be collecting data for 20 years, and revenue negative for 20 years and just be like, maybe there's a future use case, or maybe they knew. I don't know.
Yep.
Uh, what do you think the next, I don't know, 6-12 months of AI holds, or next couple of years? You think AGI is a thing?
Yeah, the super intelligence is exciting to watch. It's one of those things that the goalposts keep shifting, and each sort of seems like a natural evolution, right? Like first it's a quick search, and then it's an intern, and then all of a sudden it's PhD level sort of skills, and at some level it's not. We're still figuring out the interfaces with the world of atoms, but in terms of sort of problem solving and reasoning, like we're getting pretty kind of already there. But I think the no, it's sort of anticipating what does that collision look like. But at the same time, like I think I while the model quality just continues to just keep up over and over and over again, which is so exciting to watch. There's so much that has to be built.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people maybe I think it's easy to either underappreciate or correctly setting a target on when things arrive in the atom world is difficult. And we've seen that with, even Tesla, which is obviously like one of the greatest companies in the history of the planet and has created, technology that at a mind-blowing level, like actually being able to predict when they will be able to launch a car like the new Roadster or something is very difficult because like these things are just really complicated. And like even if you have the self-driving, like actually getting on the roads, like there's a lot of things that we keep sort of saying like, oh, self-driving we hear next year and next year, and it's next year for 10 years, and then all of a sudden it's there, right?
Yeah.
And so the like that anticipation is somewhat of a challenge. I think there's obviously a lot has to be solved with robotics. There's to be a lot to be solved with sort of drones, and there has to be a lot to be solved with vehicles. There's a lot to be solved with energy, just like power generation, and there's a lot to be solved with chip fabrication. And there's just amazing people working on all these problems, and it's been really interesting to watch how things feel like very, very, very positive. There's a lot of really strong momentum, but these are all like each of them is like a really hard problem. So, that there's a beautiful future. I think in many ways, it's hard to pick a time. And for a lot of people, I think they're in for a rude awakening. A lot of people in software, they're in for a rude awakening how long hardware timelines can be. I think for a lot of people in hardware who assume that nothing ever happens, they're in for a rude awakening how fast technologists with a vision can actually execute. So that's not an answer.
No, that's a great answer. If someone wrote you a check for $10 million, what would you pursue? Like where, or maybe not, but like what's an area that maybe slots in because they're like, if this thing existed, it would unlock a lot of other things where you have a lot of conviction on.
I don't know if I have like a ton of that conviction. I think if I did, I would probably like there's definitely people who are willing to write $10 million checks. I feel like that's the seed stage in a there's some, I mean there is some cool stuff. I think the areas that like I've been noodling on. One is I have some friends both in sort of the drone warfare, counter drone warfare, both aerial and terrestrial, these sorts of problems. There's a lot of pieces, or sort of like there's a lot of drone companies out there, but like whether it's like delivery, flight reliability, like what happens in a battlefield with unreliable network. What happens when there's sort of dust and explosions and things like that, where you're sort of it's very different than sort of flying in your backyard. How do you counter your drones? There's a whole category of interesting mechanisms, both sort of hardware and software. That's like a really interesting and what I'm trying to keep an eye. That category is like vision model and like sort of like perception models, like translate. You have to do like potentially edge compute. You'd be able to determine what something is, and with very low latency. It's a lot of like really interesting technical problems there. The other, I could probably talk about that for a long time, even though I'm like completely not an expert. And it's,
well, so
basically there's a lot of interesting engineering stuff.
we're in Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
Defense is the big technical industry. You know, item number one is AI race, and item number two is probably swarm mitigation or swarm. So, you know, scale out hundreds of millions of nano drones, and all of a sudden you got a real big problem on your hands.
Yeah. How do you manage costs, right? We're not drone drop 100 million on a single aircraft anymore. It's like, how do you there's a lot of a lot of mindfulness about cost management, but also but at the same time there's also a lot of money to pull this stuff off.
Yeah.
And so I just want to be using it wisely. And you don't want to be on the other end of drone swarm. You want to sort of have a that makes what's the other area? I feel like I think the whole like ad space is really underappreciated right now. I think you're starting to see the hints of AI doubles and things like that. Celebrities licensing their that's a really interesting space. That IP. Obviously the cost of media creation is falling. I'm like very interested in media personalization. So what does it look like for a human to engage with a brand at scale? And this is something I've been working on for a long time, but like we never really were able to fully. We sort of got to the idea of at my last startup, we kind of got the idea of like bucketing people in segments and giving them different treatments based on the segment they were in, like sophisticated methods for like the time in 2016. That world is up on its head right now, right?
Yeah.
And what does it look like to what can you do if you can literally generate a in real time as you engage with somewhere, right? Like, so what if on Instagram, instead of seeing the same ad that everybody else is seeing, what if you see an ad that's generated for you and your with regard to what would it look like to see yourself in a ad? Rather than seeing just a generic attractive person driving a car, what if you could see yourself driving the car or feel like you're driving? How would that help you engage you're considering your next vehicle purchase? And so I think that space is like there's room for 100 successful companies, both sort of the rethinking the billboard, rethinking mobile advertising, rethinking for email media, all these different delivery mechanisms, different types of and then figuring out how do you sort of tell a consistent brand story while like engaging with the consumers. And I feel like I think that's probably where I could figure something out if I had some money. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff. So
that's super cool. Like, I don't know. People like to rag on ads as boring, or it drives so much of the world. I mean, I worked at Vox Media.
Well, they are boring. That's the problem, right? They're not. There's, and the people that make the ads, think they're amazing, but most people just kind of roll their eyes and go ahead and click on ads. And that is nothing more than a brand trying to talk to potential customers. And so what is that? How do you rethink communication?
Interesting. So I was at Vox Media for almost 3 years and ran the subscriptions team, and we implemented a product that ran AI on our paywall. And so it basically went from that idea of like, hey, we can bucketize people and try and put people on a handful of different journeys to everyone can have their own custom journey, and in theory everyone eventually converts given a long which was a completely different way of thinking, like a completely different way. And then but it was like, oh wow, this is
the lifetime value of a identifiable but not yet customer, right? Like a future customer, and like getting them to thinking about that relationship over the long term, eventually driving and certainly in today's subscription world, right? Like you subscribe, you churn, you resubscribe. That's a lifetime. It's a lifetime. It's not necessarily a one. So yeah, it's a very interesting problem.
And then the flip side is like, how do you create, at least in the subscription frame of mind, like how do you create more engaging experiences to keep coming back more frequently or on your page? Like to your point, like how do you get to a place where you can generate like infinite number of those that match people's interests? It's one thing that like Connections or Wordle where it's very like great, like, and it requires a lot of edit work on the back end. There's other products where you could definitely scale things infinitely with almost no human overhead required.
And you just have to, yeah, it just becomes like a matter of like how far do you want the barriers to be? Like, how do you maintain a consistent? And that's, I know a lot of people, because you you're still attaching your brand and your recognition and your credential to whatever. But as um, hallucinations, continue to drop pretty precipitously, and in your trust, and then you can figure out maybe some kind of eval chain or some quality control. There's a lot of things that could be done.
What like from the human aspect, what does the future of engineering look like, and what are the skills that are worth developing to stay relevant for the next 10 to 20, 30 years? One thing I've said a couple times is I feel like 80% of what I'm going to need over the next 10 years, like I haven't learned yet. And maybe of that, a large proportion doesn't even exist.
Certainly true. I don't have the perfect answer. I think you still need prior to signing with Norm, I interviewed with quite a number of companies. Some gave offers, and I realized it wasn't really the right opportunity. Some, you realized it wasn't the right fit earlier. Literally everybody is trying to hire AI engineers. So if somebody says engineering is going away, I don't know what they're talking about. Like, I mean, I do, but there are a lot of companies who cannot hire people who know what they're talking about fast enough, right? There's a lot of capital market. There's their job. Now there's a disjoint between what people are doing today and what skills people need, and so that disjoint is causing a lot of a lot of employment disruption. But as you think about the skills, the sort of the if you can imagine some of these companies, who's the perfect AI engineer who can come in and like really like help us as a company, right? The skills are not entirely dissimilar from what you might think about software engineering historically. It's like, can you design a thoughtful system? Can you create the right types of abstractions now for future AI consumption rather than future engineer consumption? But like, whatever the answer right is, are you able to design things that are like highly stable? Can you build with reliability so that like we can actually have an eval and QA process and have certainty about our rollout? Can you hire other people effectively, and can you in a competitive can you inspire other people to show up, and can you inspire other engineers to put in the effort and work together toward a shared vision and shared goal? Like, these are all, if you think about sort of like a senior staff engineer, and like the only like new thing is like, okay, you actually know what you're talking about when it comes to like tokens and inference and CPU and whatever, right? The And to some extent like have done it before, because sometimes when you're coming to, I just need someone who's done or who's built an agent before to help me kind of get started. So I don't think the core skills are going away. I think there's an element of like being willing to work a little bit up the abstraction stack, like just like you imagine that assembly programmer who's learning to write in C, or that C programmer that's learning to write in Python. You sort of give up a little bit of that fine grained control, and like your practice is going to look a little bit different, but the principles and outcomes are still there. You're just like seeing with people that write Python that like actually figuring out what to rewrite in Rust now is like highly those things those skills still matter to some extent, but you have to be sort of comfortable giving up a little bit of the fine game control and to play more of an orchestrator role rather than a lines of code type role. Then I think there's also an element of what questions, like, which is essentially prompt engineering, but like the step that goes before typing things out on the keyboard, like knowledge of that there are different types of data structures out there, and that those data structures have different properties and can help you solve problems in different ways. Like, if you're just vibe coding, you're not just going to get that. At least right now, you're not solve some of those really hard challenges. And so, if you know that you need to ask for a Countman sketch, or you need to do a cuckoo algorithm, like the then you can vibe code it, right? Like it'll
Right.
know, like, import cuckoo library, and right, like you
Right.
can
You provide all
sort of
that
like
as
you're
context.
like running together with but
Yeah.
you kind of like, it's not, maybe we'll get there, but like you have to kind of know when to reach those things. And this is less like the two-person development shop and more like a sophisticated system with millions of users, like where you have like real scaling challenges and bottleneck issues and reliability problems, or like servers are going down all the time, and there's like unique traffic patterns, and there's no money on the line, all these things that,
Yep.
like, that's not
Yep.
going away. Now the way that you adapt to bugs, the way you roll out software, like that all might be. So yeah, I guess like my advice for for someone, so like don't like discount all that stuff, like that's like still pretty useful. But so that, like, what maybe is a little bit different is keeping a little bit of curiosity, being able to delegate work, figuring out how to carve out work for delegate. Uh, yeah,
I
those are
love.
my. I would say this is like a 2-year thing. I don't know what things are going to be like in 5 years. I don't think it's like 10 years, because that's moving pretty fast. But like as it stands today, right now, that's how I'd sort of talk to someone about it.
I love how you, right, like just the way you put it, of like there's the core skills that make somebody really good at engineering, and we're just like reapplying them at a different abstraction. And that's like, it's already true, right? Like if a memory block goes bad, like the RAM keeps working and I just trust the system, and I don't really, like, I don't know how it works. I'm sure there's plenty of other people that do. um and it's easier to do that because I've never understood that fully. Like I just know that it happens. I don't
Mhm.
know functionally under the hood. And that's true for a lot of things, right? Like that's true for my Distronic cruise control. I understand in theory what's going on. I trust it to work though, right? Like I let it break for me a lot of times. It's very difficult to make that transition from something that I've done manually and let something else, like trust a new system running a system that I'm.
Right, right. I think as we gain more trust, or we're able to create tools that establish right, like a really good eval test, CI/CD pipeline will take you a long way. You can start to work a little bit up the tech page, and you start to program a little bit more at the yeah, we'll see. I'm interested in sort of how, in the way this abstractions shake out, because I think so many of the ways that we've thought about abstractions are human oriented, and maybe those will but potentially they're wrong in an AI world. For example, we've talked about separating your, this is maybe a little bit of a tangent, but like separating out, like having functions that do one thing. You basically like decompose everything. Well, now in LM world, like you don't need to do that. You just have the thing that you're trying to do. You don't need to optimize for readability. And in fact, it's actually counterproductive if you split everything apart, because now you're
Sure.
like
Yeah.
splitting your context. Um, And so like that's one example where you're able to like, okay, I'm now able to work. It might be that we work in different where you look at a language like Python, which is like highly optimized for maybe not highly optimized. It's very human readable.
Right. Yep.
But like if you're optimizing for, and obviously Python's not going away because it's the language of AI, right? But you could imagine as translation becomes free, like what does it look like to sort of think in Python, but like have it
Right in Rust.
write in Rust or Zig or something,
Yeah.
and or C, right? Like, and um, once you sort of like, okay, this is the thing that does this thing, like just do it, and you know how it works, and I can relinquish that control because I have tested. That would be interesting.
Hot takes is Rust the future?
Is Rust the future? It's the future for Python. Yeah. I have not written a line of Rust, so I can't actually predict that successfully, but it's wonderful how it's revitalized Python ecosystem. It's there's a lot of language ergonomics that are out there now, thanks to the folks at Axe. And yeah, so I should mention Rust.
I like it. Just this is somebody else's opinion, but it makes sense. Was that it's memory safe, type safe, and so it makes a ton of sense for LLMs generating code because if it compiles, it runs.
Yes.
And then it compiles to like assembly code or really low, so it just stays fast.
Yeah, the type safety is huge, and Python got it just in time. But the yes, the having that safety guarantee is really good, and doing it compile time as well. Yeah, all these things to like, you know, in a world of determinism, to take a non-deterministic process and provide the necessary railroad tracks for it to be successful is generally a problem. Whether that's like if you have like having a non-deterministic process create a specification in DSL that then executes in a deterministic way, or having that non-deterministic process generate code that like can be syntactically checked in a deterministic way. That's all really powerful. Maybe it's irrelevant if you're generating, if it's pure Gen AI, but like in a financial system, in many applications, you need a bit more. So yeah, all those types of things are pretty exciting.
You said in a deterministic world, and like my I don't know opinion hot take is that our world is like on average like it's basically non-deterministic, and on average the things we create are abstractions of determinism to help us make sense of our non-deterministic.
So maybe just let it run free, and that's the right answer.
I think that's why people really struggle with LLMs, because it's also why people struggle with people management, right? Like you mentioned, like hiring and aspiring and synergizing people, and like those are really really difficult skills to test for, to find, to develop. Yeah, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's do this again. Get the new gig. Have
Yes.
some more to chat through. It'd be great.